It's time. The lore of Elden Ring's bosses that served the Golden Order. This will be interesting. Here we go.
Many of Elden Ring's bosses serve Marika's Golden Order in some shape or form, whether they're loyal to it or enslaved by it. So let's discuss all of these bosses, starting at a time before Order had even come to the Lands Between. To the north are Mountaintops of the Giants, a name that makes it abundantly clear just who dominated this region of the world. However, it was not always this way. According to the Borealis' mist incantation, the ice dragons were once lords of the mountaintops long ago, until they were defeated by the fire giants and chased from the peak. And perched upon this peak stands an enormous forge. Interestingly, the chain rings of this forge depict dragons, which might be a reference to the dragons that once dwelt here, and while I don't think we can say for sure who built this forge, the art of smithing is said to have originated among the giants, and the craft was even once considered divine. So, it seems likely that at the very least, they made good use of this fire. Sparks from this forge would fall down and fertilize the smoldering flowers that bloomed upon the mountaintops, and it seems like it was a pretty crucial part of life in this region. The most ancient giants here were called fire giants, and according to...
So wait, was this guy the last of the fire giants? I only remember seeing the one guy, and he was ass to fight. Oh my god, it was... Oh, jeez.
The Burn o' Flame incantation, they have long held a solitary curse to serve as keepers of the flame for eternity. Now, traditionally, in From Software games, curses are the domain of the gods, and indeed, the fire giants are cited to have borrowed power from one such god, who is represented here by a single large red eye. This god is called a god of the flame, and it's believed to be able to inhabit fire itself, as well as the bodies of the fire giants who worshipped it. The giants shared borders with the astrologers, who, according to their legendary Sword of Night and Flame, established themselves in the mountaintops and considered the fire giants their neighbors. The relationship here is implied to be friendly, even collaborative, maybe, as the sword does combine the power of both flame and the power of the primeval current that's glimpsed within the night sky. The sword would go on to become a treasure of the Carrion royal family, and the Carrions themselves are likely descendants of the astrologers. Generations later, these Carrion royals would call upon their old giant allies for aid, but we'll get to that in a moment. The fire giants also had another neighbor, with whom relations were not so amicable. Further down the mountains, just past the Forbidden Lands, roamed the Knights of Zamor. According to their armor, these long-lived warriors, clad in biting, freezing winds, are said to have been the mortal enemies of the fire giants since time immemorial. According to their weaponry, these beings were devoted to winter itself, and had weapons styled after icy winds and bodies that were cloaked in swirling ice storms. It makes good sense that such cold beings would be natural mortal enemies of the fire giants, and they commonly did challenge their larger rivals. But it seems like their true chance came when Queen Marika waged war against the fire giants, and the Knights of Zamor gladly joined her offensive. They earned great renown amongst the Order of the Erd Tree, and many ancient heroes of Zamor became hailed as heroes.
Y'all, I'm not gonna lie, it was really sad seeing all those dead giants just all frozen. I wasn't sure when I was going through that zone, I was so like fully expecting some of them to like wake up and try and kill me. It was almost disappointing that they didn't, but I was really sad going through there, just wondering like, what the hell happened here? And now that I'm actually like getting into the lore, it makes it a lot sadder. Well. Okay. That fire giant though, it was okay. That guy was different. He was bigger and tougher, and he had a nasty attitude. He did not want me there, but I wanted to go. Wait, what's yours? Or do I remember like Yeti guys? I remember like the big, awful, like bird creatures and stuff like that. There were a few, yeah, but they weren't like the big fire giants. They weren't the same. They weren't the same.
As the fire giants were largely wiped from the face of the earth after this war. Now, up until now, I've resisted calling the giants evil, but the reality is that in pretty much every item description, their god is described as a fell god, and the giant's flame is a flame of ruin. And to be fair, their god doesn't seem like a super nice guy. I mean, it only really opens its eye when the fire giant boss sacrifices a leg, which is pretty metal. But I'm sort of giving them the benefit of the doubt because I think it's pretty clear who's writing the history about this fell god here. The many mentions of this god as evil clearly come about because fire itself was just this extremely taboo topic during Marika's Age of the Erd Tree. And it's not just Giant's Flame items that mention this. Fire in general was prohibited to those who served the Erd Tree, which was a pretty smart defensive measure, especially considering that many rival outer gods also have a flame of their own.
I will admit, history is told by the people that win the war. So this doesn't shock me.
The Formless Mother has Blood Flame, the Three Fingers have Frenzied Flame, the Outer God of Death has Ghost Flame, but Giant's Flame in particular was capable of burning the Erd Tree, and that is a fact that clearly inspired the inevitable war with the Giants. So the Giants were deemed mortal enemies of the Erd Tree, and they allegedly desolated nature, triggered avalanches, and whipped up storms of flame.
Yeah, these guys. These fuckers right here. Them and the bird guys. Don't remember what they're called.
With their roars, clearly those who served the Erd Tree were afraid, and perhaps rightfully so. And so, led by Lord Godfrey, the forces of the Erd Tree went to war. The fire giants borrowed from the power of the fell god to fight against the Erd Tree, but were defeated nonetheless. According to the Burn O' Flame incantation, this released the fire giants from their curse to serve as keepers of the flame, all except one, who the fell god still hides within. And upon realizing that the giant's flame would never die, Marika left this last giant alive, knowing it was bound to protect the flame for all eternity, and thus leaving it cursed to protect the flame from someone like us. In addition to the Knights of Zamor, many lesser giants were also roped into the war against the fire giants. These lesser giants are called trolls, and are confirmed to be a race that is descended from the giants. This relationship is clearer at the mountaintops, where the trolls here still cast Giant's Flame incantations. Troll hammers were even once used as ancient ceremonial smithing tools. Thus it seems evident that the trolls and the fire giants coexisted for a time, and then fell further and further apart. Because while some trolls are assumedly still fire giants at heart, many now are not. In fact, at the heart of most trolls is nothing.
Yeah.
There's this suspicious hollow here, almost as if something has been ripped out of their torso.
Yeah, they're like zombies. But look, they have like a tablet inside of them, and their innards are like roots growing around them. Yeah.
And when you consider what's upon the torso of the last remaining fire giant, the truth becomes pretty clear, right?
Got ripped out
Every
of them.
single troll is now missing that giant eye of their outer god. And if you manage to look really closely here at a troll, we realize that in its place is this strange stone tablet that is held in place by what look like roots. As pointed out by Quelaag, these rooted tablets are very reminiscent of the rooted shackles that were created to bind the Omen twins, Mohg and Morgoth, which might suggest that the trolls are also being shackled or suppressed by Marika in some way. This is just speculation, of course, but Marika does have this suspicious set of stone tablets in her chambers.
That's some morbid shit there. Man, this whole game, there is so much detail in every inch of the game. Like, I'm not shocked that there are entire channels 100% dedicated to just sifting through all of the lore of Elden Ring. Like, this is... this is like Tolkien level. There's so much going on. Like, it is and it isn't, but the amount of detail, especially that can be shown in like a visual representation. Like, Tolkien did it very well with text, but the way that Elden Ring has formed its own lore and world and the depth, and even if you read every single item description of everything, you're still gonna miss out on so much because you just need to look and be observant. Yeah, he is incredible. Yeah. He did a great job. He did a great job. He's got a wonderful mind. I don't know. It's just I mean, I've only played Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, so I'm pulling from the limited experience that I have. I do want to play more, of course, but compared to any other game in general that I've played, Elden Ring has probably the most extensive lore that I've seen packed into one game. You know what I mean? It's impressive and beautiful and awe-inspiring. It's very cool. I'm very fascinated by it. And it's stuff like this that reminds me like why I used to read books so much, because I love like delving into different worlds and experiencing the different worlds that people create. And like I remember reading like the Lord of the Rings books and just being so in love with it. And so starting to play video games, like that just took me to a whole other world because it's like interactive and, you know, like your choices can affect things. And it's just, it really is beautiful. Halo, I don't remember anything about the story of Halo. I just remember playing Halo 2 a lot. And I did play Halo 1 like once or twice, but Halo 2 I played a lot, but I don't remember anything about the story. I need to revisit those games too on a later new release year. God, I think Mass Effect is next in my games to play. I think. I don't know. I have to figure out the timing. I might have to wait on Mass Effect because there are a few other games that are coming out soon that I really need to play. You can play the game and be totally oblivious to so much detail in the lore, but the discussions that arise from these videos make you realize how incredible the world design is. That's so true. It's incredible. Elden Ring is like a whole other thing. It's just great. 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. I haven't played Outer Worlds, no. Anyways, let's get back to the video.
And I think it's a good theory, for sure. A sword gravestone in the mountaintops elaborates further on the trolls' role in the War of the Giants. Here, champions battled, and allegedly, the trolls betrayed. But what was the nature of this betrayal? Did these lesser giants resent their larger kin? Or did Marika force this betrayal in some way with the stone shackles? I think that's largely up to you guys. But whatever the case, nowadays the trolls are said to have lost their minds and are inseparable from the weight of their rusty swords, which have long since lost any trace of gold. So whether they carry coffins or mine down at the bedrock of the earth, their sad state brings to mind enslavement now, more than anything else. That said, some trolls do seem to have a little bit more dignity, and these are the ones that fought against the Erd Tree later on. These were the enchanted troll knights, deemed comrades of the young Renala, and they were called into service when the queen invoked an oath that they swore long ago. As mentioned earlier, the trolls go way back to when the fire giants and the astrologers were still neighbors, and back then it seems, for whatever reason, they swore an oath to the astrologers. And
because they're cool.
Later, when the Carians went to war against the Erd Tree, I assume, the trolls were finally called into that service to be treated as true knights of Caria, wielding swords embedded with blue glintstone and summoning enormous glint blades. They fought arm in arm with their long-lost human comrades. Iji is another such example of that relationship, by the way. He became the Carian family's royal blacksmith, and unlike the Stone Digger trolls, he actually uses that weapon for its intended purpose, as a blacksmith's hammer, and now he serves the Lady Rani, who he's known ever since her childhood. Next, I want to talk about the Knights Cavalry. These recurring bosses wander the dim roads at night.
These guys are
were
cool.
Once led by the Fell Omen. Now, this description specifically references Margit's title as the Fell Omen, not Morgoth's title as the Omen King, and I think this is important because Margit represents this undercover extension of Morgoth, who scouts further out in the world and takes out champions who approach all the way from Stormvale Castle. Morgoth's big role in the story is that he's a stout defender of the Erd Tree who wouldn't dare betray the Golden Order. He calls all the other demigods willful traitors all, simply for fighting over the great runes of the Elden Ring. Even Radahn, who has a lot of signs of being quite loyal to the Golden Order, is called a traitor, simply because he fights at one stage another character who has a great rune. You can even see Morgoth in one of these opening cutscene cinematics leaping onto what looks like Radahn, and managing to even get an attack off on one of the mightiest of the demigods. Actually, a channel named Smotown has a really good little video discussing whether this is indeed Radahn, and I'd highly recommend you go and check that out. Anyway, my point is, the Knights Cavalry seem to fulfill a similar role to Margit. According to their armor, they were deliverers of death for great warriors, knights, and champions. Simple as that. No motive is listed, except that they have a reputation for taking out the greatest warriors of the world. And that makes sense that that would be their aim, because only the strongest can acquire 2 great runes and approach the Erd Tree, so it's almost as if strength itself must be stifled so that Morgoth's failing order might be maintained. As for why Margit defends Stormvale, I like to think that he's fighting here because he recognizes that Godric is the weakest of the demigods, who yet remains, so he's bolstering his strength in that sense and trying to maintain this unsteady stalemate.
Well, maybe if he didn't just graft a bunch of, shit on him and taint his physical form with those of others. I don't know, that's just seems gross. Oh, to sidetrack for just a moment, speaking of grafting, I saw a video last night that kind of blew my mind. Did you guys see the guy that got a double arm transplant? Speaking of grafting arms, he was an electrician and he got his arms basically incinerated off by electricity, and he got a double arm transplant. Did you know And every day, apparently, he would gain another inch of nerves, but it ended up only taking him like 9 months or something before he could feel in his fingertips. Human arms, yeah, of a deceased person. They grafted real human arms onto him. Oh, I haven't seen that one. I saw the one with the girl that got bit by a raccoon, and then they took all of the nerves out of her arm and planted them here, and then they gave her a robotic arm that she could feel because they attached like electrodes to her nerves. So she has a robotic arm that can feel. But like, I had no idea. It's this guy in like Iceland, I believe. Sounds like a better way to go than having a dead man's arms grafted onto you. I think they got them like grafted onto him within like 6 hours of the dude dying too. I think I don't know, man. That's just crazy. That's insane. It's so cool. It's fascinating. Bionic? I don't know, actually. I don't know what would make it bionic compared to I don't know. I mean, she's a cyborg, but it's entirely robotic. It's just electrodes attached to nerves. I guess I don't know. Imagine if the arms of a kleptomaniac. I don't think he could. I think he, after more than a year, he was just able to start moving his fingers like this. I don't know how much control he has over it. But damn, that freaked me out that they've already done that. It's so cool. Anyways, back to the video.
His strength in that sense and trying to maintain this unsteady stalemate. Having a strong defense is essentially the guiding principle of those who serve the Erd Tree, especially as you get closer to the capital. There are numerous examples of this. The soldiers of Leyndell fight their battles defensively. The knights of Leyndell always put their shield before the sword. And Leyndell itself, the city, is built to withstand siege, with layers and layers of defensive measures built in. And the protective standard to which all defenders of the Erd Tree aspire is that of the Tree Sentinels, whose order became the living rampart of the Erd Tree, embellished with...
Here, sorry, just give me 1 sec. I gotta turn up the heat. Sorry, apparently the people upstairs are cold, I guess. Me too. I'm wearing a fucking sweater.
Golden tree-crested armor and shields that can retaliate with bolts of light. They turn defense into offense, and that's the idea in Leyndell. Defense is the best offense, and the way this idea is presented is just such beautiful storytelling. So many characters in other areas of the lands between long to return to the blessed land of the Erd Tree, and even for you it's this goal that looms over you the entire game. So the path is designed to repel everyone getting close. You know, the highway through Leonia has fallen apart, so you need to take this secret waterlogged route up through the mountain. This is my favorite part of the game, by the way, finding this secret path through the mountains and infiltrating the Altus Plateau. And then when you finally get there, there are countless ballista and golem archers, and they're all positioned facing outwards. And finally, you even find a side entrance to Leyndell, and that is even guarded by a tree sentinel. And it's not just any tree sentinel. This one is actually a draconic tree sentinel, which is kind of different. This variant of sentinels arose after the ancient dragons attacked Leyndell in its history, and we talk more about this event in the video about the demigods. But in the end, the ancient dragons were befriended, and worship of the ancient dragons was deemed acceptable, alongside belief in the Earth.
Oh, they're so cool. I love their design. I'm glad that they did have some actual classical dragons in here too. I am so certain that I just missed out on a lot of optional bosses. But I feel like I didn't really fight a whole lot of dragons in this game. Like this guy, as soon as you got him to like X amount of health, he just fucks off. You know?
Tree. Dragons were conjoined with the Golden Order, so to speak, and the dragon cultists took after them in a physical fashion.
Wyverns are still dragons. Why are we still having this discussion? All wyverns are dragons, not all dragons are wyverns.
Also instrumental to the rise of the Erd Tree were the Crucible Knights.
Love
They
these
were
guys.
eventually scorned for their strength, for their appearance, and for their close resemblance to Chaos, and how that inspired who they originally were. 16 of these knights served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and all 16 of them yet remain across the lands between. One is imprisoned in an Everjail, 2 appear to be dead and are summoned to fight you as spirits. A number of Crucible Knights still patrol Lane Dell, some protect great tree roots, though most just stand dejected in lost corners of the earth, and one of them has even found a new blasphemous master. So, the next time you fight these, think carefully about where they are and who they're fighting with, because each knight is a distinct character, with purpose, or lack thereof, even though they were all once united by a common purpose and a single lord. Many of these knights fight with different aspects of the Crucible. Some fight with wings, some with horns, fire, and tail, but what they all have in common is their mastery of their Lord Godfrey's signature stomp attack, which breaks up the earth beneath their feet. This is such a cool homage to Godfrey. You know, knowing the lore is great. It definitely makes dying to it feel a little bit better, right? Anyway, I think it's important to remember that Godfrey and his Crucible Knights existed in an age before the Erd Trees, an age with the Great Tree in its primordial form, back when there was this red-tinted crucible of life, and these were warriors who drew power from its chaos. Eventually, however, they were brought on board with order, which is best exemplified by Godfrey being...
You know what else worked on them? Rock sling.
tamed by the Beast Regent upon his back. There are 2 types of ornamentation that the Crucible Knights can have. There's axe ornamentation, which is worn by Crucible Knight Ordovus and his men, and I think the axe is a bit of a homage to Godfrey again. And then there are some knights that have great tree ornamentation, and these are displayed by the Knight Soluria and her men, which is of course a reference to the Great Tree itself. And I'd like to quickly talk about the Great Tree. In one of my first lore videos, I proposed that there was a great tree that must have existed before the Erd Tree, and that the Erd Tree might have even replaced this great tree. This was based on the English root resin item description, which has the word
Who flings rocks when they can wield a big bad sword? Yeah, but you can't even touch me with your sword because you're already buried under a bunch of rocks. How about that? Take that.
Great Tree, capitalized and as one word, which certainly makes you think that it's a distinct tree, right? The line is, the roots of the Great Tree once linked to those of the Erd Tree,
Good
which is a
luck.
line that seems to clearly set up that these are 2 separate trees. Except, the Japanese translation doesn't say that. The Japanese translation says, these roots are said to have once been connected to the Golden Tree. It does mention the Great Tree earlier, but it seems to just be referencing the Erd Tree as that Great Tree, because it is a really big tree. Some people have taken this to mean that there was no Great Tree before the Erd Tree, and, you know, while that's certainly possible, I do think it's still fair to argue that a Great Tree existed before the Erd Tree. For one, many of the Crucible Knight items reference a primordial form of the Erd Tree, and they have ornamentation and history that is based on this primordial holiness that is not the holiness of the Erd Tree. So calling it a great tree might just be referencing that tree. And secondly, Soluria defends a giant tree in the deep root depths. It's one that has this hollowed out entrance that is reminiscence of the entrance at the Erd Tree as well, so maybe there's something here. I just kind of wanted to set that straight for now. But the reality is that we don't really know for sure, and hopefully DLC will shed a light on some of these past ages of the world, which seems to be a common trend with From Software DLC, and there just really are so many remnants of previous ages in this game, and I'd love to see a little bit more about what their cultures really were like. It kind of makes you resent just how all-encompassing the Erd Tree became. So many of these cultures have been lost, and I guess that's how a lot of characters in-game feel as well. They feel upset by that, and knowing this fact helps you understand why so many of these characters are okay with burning down the Erd Tree.
Fair enough.
Totally fine with that. And this brings us to our next boss, because in the act of burning down the Erd Tree, you release a slew of ulcerated tree spirits from it. These spirits lie suffering beneath the ash until you come along. But of course you fight many of these tree spirits across the Lands Between, even before the endgame. There's an ulcerated tree spirit at the husk of this minor Erd Tree, there's a bunch in catacomb dungeons by great tree roots, there's even one at the husk of the Halig Tree. There's a lot of these. Some might even say there's too many of these bosses. I think they're the worst boss in Elden Ring. But anyway, understanding their lore might make it a bit more palatable. So, while these creatures fight near the trees, I don't think they're defending them. Rather, I kind of think they're this corrupted byproduct of dead or dying trees. We know that one of the new purposes of the Erd Tree is to accept spirits and allow them to live on, and it's almost like these ulcerated spirits are this horrific failure of that process. One of Miyazaki's favorite themes in these games is the idea that life is not supposed to be eternal, and I think these spirits are a physical manifestation of stagnation and decay. They're this product of an age of an Erd Tree that really should have ended a long time ago. Most tree spirits drop golden seeds, which are also found at the base of smaller
These guys are a little
trees,
more rotted seeds,
they read, when the Elden Ring was shattered, these seeds flew from the Erd Tree, scattering across the various lands, as if life itself knew that its end had come. A talisman also goes on to say, the Erd Tree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that Erd Tree seeds could not exist. This was back when there was an age of plenty, when blessings literally dripped from the boughs of the Erd Tree like sap, and the Erd Tree's warm light healed those who bathed in its rays. The Erd Tree flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. Such is the course of all life. Then the leaves began to fall, and as you know from the introduction and the endings, the fallen leaves tell a story. The story is that the Erd Tree was withering. Scattered across the Lands Between are minor Erd Trees, where you go to collect crystal tears. Basins were placed at the feet of minor Erd Trees in order to collect these tears, though in some cases these tears are dropped by Erd Tree avatars instead. When the Elden Ring was shattered, the avatars emerged, wielding ceremonial staffs that depict the Erd Tree in its historic radiance. These creatures are the will of the dying Erd Tree, made manifest, I think. They are literally part tree, after all, and they fight desperately to protect the minor Erd Trees, which are the offspring of the withering Erd Tree itself. Some avatars, placed in Caelid and Miquella's Halig Tree, are rotten avatars, and they even have this uniquely designed staff that festers with rot, just as they do.
That's so
Remember,
sad.
the Halig Tree is also an emulation of the Erd Tree, so it makes sense that it has its own avatars as well. And they fight on, because to many of these creatures, any Erd Tree, whether it's minor or a copy or doomed, is something worth protecting. So, if you've made it all the way to the end of this video, then chances are you love this kind of long-form content, so an Audible subscription might also be just right for you.
I wish.
Sign up at Audible.
I can't do Audible. I can't do like if I'm just listening to words being said and not also like watching something and interacting with it in some way, it's just in one ear and out the other. Like, I will often just re-listen to videos if I find that the voices are, like, relaxing. I'll have no idea what the people are saying, but it's something going on in my head that it's like a distraction that also helps me focus on my main task at hand. I can't do audiobooks. doesn't work for me. I need to be like reading an actual book, and I can't do that on like a screen. It has to be a physical book. Screen, if I'm reading a bunch of words for a long time, hate it so much.
audible.com/VartiVidya or text VartiVidya to 500 500 and you'll get a free credit for the first month and then again for every paid month thereafter. But this time I'd recommend you spend that credit on The Sandman, which might be just one of the most unique audiobooks that you've ever listened to. It has its own cast of voice actors,
cool.
including the author, Neil Gaiman himself, who narrates, as well as sound effects and music. It's an incredible introduction to the story that a lot of people are talking about right now.
Yeah, that's cool as hell.
Have a listen and see what I mean.
The year was 1916. Roderick Burgess conceived a plan.
In my power.
He would capture death. Did Burgess know what he had got?
Damn you! You are death. At last, finally, I am free.
So,
that is cool.
If you'd like access to this or to thousands of other audiobooks or podcasts, then visit audible.com/VartiVidya or text VartiVidya to 500 500. Thank you to Audible for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching.
Yeah, like I can fall asleep to like watching stuff, but that's only if I'm so tired that I have no idea what's going on. Generally, when I'm like going to bed, I lie down like on my back with at least one cat in one armpit, and I have a shirt over my eyes, even if it's dark out, because it's, I don't know, it's like something that I have to do now. And I've got my blanket like up to here, so the only thing showing is like my mouth, my awkward mouth, and then I just lie there, and usually I'm asleep within a couple minutes. But I want it to be quiet. When I was a kid, I used to have one of those beds where there were like pillars that went up at each of the corners, and I would drape blankets all around them, so I was just completely entombed. And then I had like a mountain of like stuffed animals, like Beanie Babies, that would just like encompass me all around. Oh man. In a coffin? Yeah, well, I basically used to. I was completely entombed in blankets and Beanie Babies. Just like a nest. It was awesome. I kind of miss that. I mean, having this here, just like at the back of my bed, has been kind of nice too. Like my bed is very enclosed in like a nest. It's quite lovely, actually. I like it. But yeah, I just had a bunch of blankets, a bunch of pillows, a bunch of stuffed animals, and all sides of the bed were just entombed by blanket walls, and I was just completely cut off from the world. And I remember playing on like my on my Game Boy Color, and I had the light for it and everything. Oh man. One day I will have a proper nest. A proper nest. It'll be so cozy and so dark. But even when it's dark, like I like the sensation of just having like a shirt over here. I use just like a tank top. I just lay it over like the top half of my head. Also helps keep me warm, which is nice. But yeah, either way, that was a good video. That was cool. It was really neat to learn a little bit more about some of the bosses around the world.